Next up is Managing Director and CEO of Chalice Mining, Alex Dorsch. Since joining Chalice in 2017, Alex has led the company through an exceptional growth period. His leadership has been recognised through multiple awards, including New and Emerging Leader of the Year by Mining News and CEO of the Year by Kitco. Has a diverse range of experience in a variety of leadership roles across the resources sector: management consultant, engineer, project manager and corporate advisor. Please welcome Alex Dorsch.
Thanks, Digby, and good afternoon, everyone. Great to be back in Kalgoorlie for this fantastic forum. So presenting today on Chalice Mining. As it says there, we're really opening up one of Western Australia's more exciting new mineral provinces, and as it says there, it's really focusing on nickel, copper and PGEs. The usual forward-looking statements, competent person disclosures, these are available on our website should you wish to read these in full. So who is Chalice? Chalice is an ASX 200 green metals explorer developer, and we really have a track record of creating a significant amount of value for our shareholders over the space of the last 15-20 years. Our purpose has really been fine-tuned to really play a key role in decarbonisation, finding these metals which the world is going to need in very large quantities to decarbonise the global economy. And our aspiration here, based on what we've found on the western part of Western Australia, is to create a new world-class multi-district green metals province in the western part of the Yilgarn. Obviously, coming out here to Kalgoorlie, you can feel that that job has been done over the last 50 or 60 years out here in the eastern goldfields. We're really trying to replicate that success in an entirely new and newly recognised part of Western Australia. And it's very proximal to Perth there, as you can see on the left-hand side. So our portfolio is twofold. We're focused on our Gonville nickel copper PGE project, obviously a discovery in 2020. We're advancing that project towards development. And then around that, we were fortunate there was a lot of vacant land when we made that discovery. So we staked the vast majority of that land holding there over about 8,000 square kilometres in the West Yilgarn. And really that remains a key focus for us to sort of find the next one and then hopefully the next one after that. But first of all, the Gonville project, obviously our project is a significant one. It really is differentiated by a couple of things. The proximity to Perth there, about 70 kilometres northeast of Perth, and secondly, its size. So it is a tier 1 scale magmatic sulphide resource. It contains 16 million ounces of precious metals, 860,000 tonnes of nickel, 520,000 tonnes of copper and 83,000 tonnes of cobalt, a very, very substantial amount of metals in anyone's language. If you like to think in nickel terms, it's equivalent to a 3 million tonne contained nickel equivalent or a 30 million ounce palladium equivalent deposit. And then importantly, it also has a high-grade component to it, which extends from near surface down to about 800 metres. And we recently made some extension to that mineralisation there at 800 metres, which I'll speak to. And all of that remains open. So it's a very, very exciting new start to a significant scale development. So it's a strategically sized resource, obviously very relevant mix of metals for decarbonisation, but also we shouldn't forget urbanisation of the world's population. So typically, people are moving from regions into cities and they become much, much more metals intensive consumers when they do that. We own 100% of the project. It's entirely on Chalice-owned farmland, so our resource really, we're focusing on developing that on our farmland. It has significant upside, like I said, and that proximity to Perth comes with a very, very advantageous set of infrastructure, as well as obviously the large and highly skilled Perth workforce. So we're exploring the area around our discovery and developing that deposit. And then something that's obviously gaining a lot of attention is we opened up a data room recently to really look for strategic partnerships, and that process is well underway. So I want to talk about geopolitics first. So Gonville is already a strategic asset, but you could say that really it is a bit in a class of its own relative to other recent discoveries. And when you put in context the level of dominance that Russia and South Africa have on the PGMs, so palladium and platinum. They really produce almost the entire world's supply of those metals. But then you look at places like Indonesia and its dominance now in nickel. These are big issues for Western economies and Western automakers in particular, because they're completely reliant on jurisdictions that they do not really want to do business with. So we here in Western Australia, obviously we're a fantastic, stable democracy. So we are our products from Western Australia here are very attractive to larger Western customers. So I guess that has driven us to look at strategic partners alongside, I guess, the scale of the development that we're considering here. But things like the US Inflation Reduction Act have really sort of spurned unique levels of interest in assets like this. So the need to decarbonise, it is a global challenge, and that it's not going to be sort of just the first phase of technologies. It's not going to be the first phase of wind turbines, solar panels, electric vehicles. It's the sustaining that level of metal output over to create the second phase and third phase and so on. So these are very, very metals intensive technologies. As you can see on the top there, hydrogen, electric vehicles, hybrid vehicles, they all need a lot of this metal. So I think probably the most topical recently is particularly around hybrid vehicles. People would be familiar with Toyota's original approach to this, to electrification. They were somewhat hesitant to push to a 100% electrification of their vehicle product line. And they have been recently joined by Ford in really sort of doubling down in the areas of hybrids. I think people have come to the realisation that pure battery electric vehicles for the entire planet is just not feasible. There is going to be too much demand there and too little supply to go around. So I think it's very interesting to see that hybrid vehicles are starting to take a bigger and bigger role. And that's that demand level for metals to do this decarbonisation is a challenge when you look at just how prolific the world was at exploring and finding metal back only sort of 50 or 60 years ago. So if you can see there, in the 1950s through the 1970s, we were finding metal every day of the week, dozens and dozens of tier one types of discoveries. Obviously, most of those discoveries are still in production today. They are the big foundation mines. We had a little bit of a spurt in the late 90s, 2000s, and then really since the China boom has finished in sort of 2011, 2012, exploration expenditure has fallen off a cliff, and obviously the discovery rate has gone down to negligible. So since the world galvanised together, signed the Paris Agreement, that the world was committing to decarbonise, there's only been 7 giant base metal discoveries in that last 8 years. So it's quite a problem for the world in that I guess the easy finds are gone, and that's what makes Gonville even more rare and special. So the Gonville resource, this is a schematic on the right-hand side here. As you can see, it's constrained largely to a pit, which is 2 kilometres in dimension. The resource is defined to 800 metres below surface. I mentioned the contained metal numbers. This is still a work in progress. After drilling about 1,100 drill holes, about 300,000 metres of drilling, we're still defining more and more. It's located on Chalice-owned farmland. And it's at the resource pit shell there. I guess most of this resource will be open pittable. As you can see there, low strip ratio of 1.6. It's quite unusual to see things of that size with such low strip ratios. It is very, very large. It's the second largest nickel sulfide, so if you just consider its nickel content alone, it's the second largest undeveloped nickel sulfide resource in Australia, second only to West Musgrave. Obviously now that's part of BHP's portfolio, and you can see there's a big gap down to the next biggest in the space. So these were some recent results that we announced just last week. So the resource, like I said, it remains open down dip. We've got 4 rigs continuing to drill on it. And even before we consider the potential sort of in the region along the strike length, this thing is going to grow substantially just before we leave the boundaries of our farmland. So as you can see there on that image, that's looking to the southwest. Down the strike length of Gonville there, you can see that we drilled a hole at about 1,200 metres and that was about 900 metre step out down plunge of the resource. And that's hit some very high-grade copper and PGE mineralisation at the basal contact or the footwall of the intrusion there. It's not so much, what's the significance of those hits by themselves, it's the fact that there's hundreds and hundreds of metres of with no drilling in the surrounds of those results, and we're now stringing them together to some very high-grade zones that we've hit in that 300 to 400 metres deep. Closer to surface. So really now it's driving us to, we're seeing grades at depth that are sort of between 4 and 5 times the pit, open pit resource average, and that's driving us to look at early underground scenarios now, so bringing maybe a decline in parallel to the development of the open pit. And really that would be targeting that mineralisation that extends there from 400 metres down to now 1100 metres. But as you can see on the right hand side of the page, there's still a lot of more dip extent that can be added here. So there's another 1.6 kilometres of the Gonville intrusion modelled beyond the limit of the resource. So the other unique thing about our resource is that it has this significant development optionality. So as you can see here, that the grade tonnage curve, depending on the economic conditions of the time and largely commodity prices at the time, the benefit of having these large, shallow resources that you have a lot of flexibility in terms of the scale and the nature of the development. So we've now selected 2 open pit development cases for the upcoming scoping study. They've obviously been updated to incorporate the resource update that we updated in March of this year. And that scoping study is targeted for completion this quarter. So you can see there that I guess there's that level of optionality. That's one of the unique things about this style of deposit. What processing we're envisaging here has been the topic of a lot of different option analysis, if you like, over the space of the last 12 to 18 months. I guess we have landed on this as a preferred flow sheet. This is basically a two-part flow sheet, if you like. The first part is a fairly conventional flotation process to concentrate the copper and the majority of the PGEs into a copper concentrate. We plan to sell that copper concentrate to a copper smelter, get very, very attractive offtake terms for a product like that. It's going to, as it says there, be somewhere around 20 to 25% copper, between 100 and 150 grams per tonne of PGEs. So it's a very, very high value product, and that's going to be shipped to an international copper smelter. On the nickel side, I guess we have a small amount of the PGEs as well as the cobalt locked in the nickel minerals. So we're looking at not only floating that nickel and concentrating that nickel and cobalt and remaining PGEs, but then doing some hydrometallurgy on that stream. And given the scale of the resource base that we're talking about here, we're sort of underpinning, potentially decades of life for an operation of this nature. We believe that hydrometallurgical examination and investigations we're doing today is very much warranted, and that will allow us to bypass the nickel smelting market and then go directly to battery customers. So the lithium-ion industry is screaming out for precursor nickel cobalt in a form from a Western ESG-friendly source and in a form that they can utilise. So we're planning on producing a mixed hydroxide precipitate of that nickel and cobalt, which we will sell and market to a battery customer. And work is really focusing now on trying to categorise each different part of the deposit. Given it is a magmatic system, it does have some variability. There's an order of magnitude difference between the highest grade mineralisation in the deposit and the lowest grade mineralisation. So we're really now focused on characterising that deposit and continuing to assess, where is the optimum mix here? What is the optimum product mix to sell these metals? And alongside that, we're committed to strong environmental stewardship. I guess given the location of the asset, it goes without saying, this is a very unique opportunity to prove that mining can coexist with proximal communities and an environmentally sensitive area. You look at operations like Boddington, Cadia in New South Wales, very, very similar type of situation. You've got towns and environmentally sensitive areas very close to those operations. We're really following the strong lead of other, performers like that in the industry. We've already committed to a very ambitious biodiversity goal of no net loss of species or habitat as a result of the operation. So we've already demonstrating that, and alongside that we've already done effectively 2 years worth of environmental baselining to support all the regulatory permits that we're going to require to mine Gonville. And then I think the other point is about the community benefits. And you obviously, in a place like Kalgoorlie is very, very relevant. You can imagine what Kalgoorlie would look like without the super pit. It just wouldn't exist in anywhere near this level of prosperity, or this level, this size of this town. So I guess it demonstrates long-lived operations of scale can add significant benefits to local economies and the proximal communities. So we're very much demonstrating that already. We've already got a very high level of spend in the communities, and we're really doing some modelling at the moment to demonstrate, what that will look like to the surrounding economies over time. We're also building collaborative relationships. We've already got a very strong relationships with the Whadjuk and Yuward traditional owners, and that really forms the foundation of, what we're planning to do forward. They're already very much involved in surveying and monitoring of activities within the Julimar State Forest, immediately north of Gonville, and I guess we plan to really strengthen those relationships over time. The current resource, though, if you look on the left-hand side of this page, I'm sure people have seen this image before. The Gonville deposit and the resource occupies just 2 kilometres of strike length. And this is a 30-kilometre strike length complex of intrusive geology. We've already drilled, as it says there, about 110 drill holes along the strike length going north of the deposit, and we've intersected some very interesting mineralisation there in identical geology to what we see at Gonville. So we know that at least 10 kilometres of that strike length is mineralised. I guess, what's probably most exciting is that next 20 kilometres we're going to be drilling in this quarter. We're going to start drilling those Bodan, Jans, Torres targets along the right-hand side of that page later this quarter. So very, very exciting stuff, given that none of it has been tested before. I guess the drilling at Hooley on the left-hand side of the page there gives you context of sort of how far away these areas and how big this system is. Hooley there is very exciting because it's giving us a thickening of that prospective geology at depth. And we're getting some very interesting high-grade results there, albeit narrow at the moment, but it's really vectoring us to go deeper and deeper to try and find, I guess, that central part of this magma flow that was responsible for Gonville. Regional exploration drilling, like I said, later this quarter. The scoping study, which is not far away now, these are key catalysts for Chalice in the coming months. Obviously, the strategic partnering process as well. We are well advanced with a range of parties there. We're in discussions with industry participants all the way from end users right back to the mid-cap and large-cap mining houses. And those discussions will continue, and really we're looking for the technical and development expertise to help us maximise the value of this asset. And then the Gonville discovery, obviously we made in 2020, is really just part of our portfolio. I guess, we are very confident here that this is not an isolated occurrence of magmatic sulphide mineralisation. These things typically do cluster in camps of deposits, and we're in a very fortunate position there that we basically own all the surrounding land 100%. So we have, over the course of the last 18 months to 2 years, done loads of geochemical sampling, geophysics. We've really sort of thrown the kitchen sink at the province, and we've now really got to a point where we've got a lot of drill-ready targets. As it says there, 10 of those are going to be drilled starting this week. We've got a rig that's just mobilised to a regional target, but as, I guess, cropping activities commence later this year, the rig will effectively gain access to to those farms, and most of these targets are on existing cleared farms, and then we'll go and drill those, which is obviously very, very exciting. The prize here is, I guess, more of what we found at Gonville when we started, that 3% nickel, 1.2% copper, 10 grams per tonne PGMs. We believe, I guess, this system, this province is capable of delivering metal tenor or sulphide tenor like that. So that is obviously a very, very attractive prize to go hunt in the region. So to summarise, I guess, we've got a world-class, very, very unique asset. It's a tier 1 scale resource, which is very, very unusual in the Western world. It is a very unique, highly leveraged commodity exposure, and it's really the right commodities given the thematic that we're looking at the moment globally. You've got a team with a track record of delivering and adding value. And then the level of exploration upside here, obviously the portfolio has quite a unique level of exposure in terms of upside to a completely new mineral province over in the western part of the state. So thanks very much.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Alex. I think we've got time for one question which has come through online. When does the next phase of drilling start, and what are your priority targets?
Yeah, so like I said, the regional targets sort of surrounding within 50 kilometres of Gonville, that drilling is underway at the moment on one. But there's another handful of targets that will be drilled sort of over the course of this half. The State Forest, the next permit for drilling in the State Forest, we anticipate very, very soon. So we'll be doing some air core and some diamond drilling in that region later this quarter, like I said.
Thanks very much, Alex Dorsch.